One of the things I guess I found interesting was his comments on the attractional church, kind of the APC church, and it really could still stay the aches, pains, and complaints church as well as the attractional kind of church, but how that often is a temptation of, so often the church, the driving force behind the church is, how do we get more people in? How do we get more people in? And often, how do we get more young people in? Well, let's start this, this, and this. And I really like his point that it's Jesus lifted up that should be the attraction, not how awesome our band is. And I guess you can hold it in tension with, you want to have worship be meaningful and stuff, and you want to do a good job, but you can have a very vibrant, authentic worship service with people like me who can barely strum a guitar. If Jesus is really the thing people are there for, I think when that's authentic, people are gonna come, and so I found that kind of interesting about just that whole section on the attractional church.
And you're on page 19 in the introduction.
And as I said, I haven't held the book in my hand before because I listened to it. So where in the book does it tell what APC stands for?
Page 19.
18 and 19.
ABC is attendance, buildings, cash.
Right.
A stands for attractional, P for propositional, C for colonial.
Right, I couldn't remember propositional. Okay.
Right,
yep.
Right.
I have kind of a fundamental issue with people like Reverend Sweet and others who write about this. I wish that they would go and serve a 250-member, 160-year-old Presbyterian Methodist Lutheran church for 3 years and see if they can implement any of this in an existing church. And then write a book. I want to say to them, okay, let's test it in the real world, in a real existing place where there are people who have been there and who have come in under a different set of parameters. Most people, I think, that are in a lot of our churches in the Presbytery think they pay their money so that they will be taken care of. I think that's an attitude that a lot of people have. I pay my pledge so you will take care of me. I don't want to, nobody told me I had to go, talk to poor people or reach out to anybody anywhere. That's not what I signed up for.
You reach out to me.
And we pay our pastor to do that. That's the other half of that.
That's the other half of it, yep.
We pay you to go be that for us. We don't want to have to do. So that's where I keep seeing the stress of all. I get this. I get that I agree. This is what we're supposed to be doing. How do we convince people who came in under some other, I go to this church because my grandma went to this church, I didn't come here because I want to go on Saturday mornings to neighborhoods where I don't know anybody and see what they, I didn't sign up for that. So I don't know how you make that.
And what, because there are some people who would say, let them go, let them drop out because they're not really
exactly. That would be
Christians. They're not
right.
real Christians. The real Christians don't think this. And yet, we did that to them.
Right.
I mean, they didn't get that way because an evil spirit came upon them.
That's right. We taught them that's what church is.
Right. We've taught them that.
Do you think it's easier to start from scratch than?
Oh yeah.
I mean, because I see all the churches in Delta that seem to be growing. They're brand new startup churches, and it is. And sometimes I wish I could just go and start from scratch using some of these principles, because I agree. Sometimes yeah, this would be great if I could change the culture to this, but he doesn't really ever say. He says this is what the culture should be, but he doesn't say these are some steps
of how to do it.
I mean, of course, it'd be different in every single context, so I'm not sure he could, but it's definitely hard to slowly change that culture.
I don't know if you read Carol Howard Merritt's blogs now, but since she's coming in September to the Presbytery to talk, she's pastor of existing historical congregation. She's written a book called Tribal Church, And on her blog, which is by the same name, she just recently, talked about the numbers and about, how there are like 556 pastors out there that have their, PIFs online, willing to take a new church development, and there's 7 new church developments looking for a pastor. She said, here are all these pastors really wanting to go out there and do it, but because of these systems, because of these different things, we only have 7 churches that are really getting ready to get started. I mean, you talk about historical, when we think about this, it's not just at our church level too, but it's about the Presbyterian, the Synod, and the GA level. And it's really interesting to have Carol and Bruce Reyes-Chow, having these conversations weekly and, at a national level about what's going on and the changes in the churches, because it's going to have to happen. And we always say that we're not a top-down type of a polity-run church, but there are elements that, if we don't change some things at the top, then this bottom stuff's never going to change.
One of the images that he uses, and I don't know whether it's in this book or when he spoke at this Riverside Church a couple months ago, and I've listened to the CDs of that too, so I can't remember whether it was the book or that. But the image he uses is that the Christian church spreads by seed, not by potted plant. And we have a potted plant new church development approach in the Presbyterian Church instead of... and I think that needs to change. I think that's a discussion we need to have in the denomination about how we
that's a prime example, because there are all sorts of criteria. You have to have reached a certain number, and it's not about everything we all preach is it's not about numbers, right? Well, you have to have a number.
Even more so, and I think I've shared this with you, but in Pittsburgh Presbyterian, there was a case study where there were a couple guys that were doing ministry and having regular meetings with people in coffee houses and things like that, and they were forming Bible studies, and they had a growing group of people, and they had come from a Presbyterian background, so they turned to the Pittsburgh Presbyterian and they said, "We think we got a new church, development going on here. We want to be involved in that." They said, "That's great. All right, what are your credentials?" I said, "Well, what do you mean?" "Well, where did you go to seminary?" "Well, I went to college, but I haven't gone to seminary." And they haven't even passed the ordination exam. But when they came to the committee that was looking at the new church developments, that really forced them to say, "Hey, we've got to change the way we're looking at things, because people are doing ministry out there. They are growing a church, and yet, we have said you have to be, an ordained pastor before you can do that. You have to have all these things in order." So they started looking at that and said, "Okay, well, we can start supporting you this way if you start looking at going to seminary and getting educated and going through this." So they're starting to look at a little bit more seed. It's more like starting a seedling and then transplanting it.
That's right.
It's closer, but
right.
Pots.
Right.
Pots.
That's right.
That's what we're talking
That's
about.
right.
Not exactly.